Good afternoon. It's Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday after Labor Day weekend, September the 3rd. I think it's September the 3rd at least. It's Journal 158, T+154. And I think today I'd like to chat about something that happened a couple of weeks ago. And that was a podcast interview with an old friend and colleague of mine. Who I've interviewed with before, actually, and probably among the two most pleasant interviews I've ever had. Mostly because Carm Capriotto uh, prepares so well for what he does. But the this particular interview was about the first time I ever left the shop. It was about the first time I ever left the safety and the security of the only world I really knew as a professional at that time, which is the world that my father and I built first in Santa Monica and then out in Simi Valley, California. And it was an angry world. It was a hostile world. It was an unfriendly world at that point in my career. It wasn't a lot of fun. I had two kids. They were both bright. I knew they could go to college. I knew I couldn't get them to college because I wasn't making enough money. And I knew that there were plenty of things that were wrong with the industry that I had chosen or that had chosen me. And all of these things bubbled to the surface in a speech that I delivered for the Equipment and Tool Institute back in October of 1984. And in conversation with Carm, when we were interviewing once before that, I had mentioned how frustrated and upset, angry, disappointed I was that so little has changed over the years, and the fact that I had more or less adopted a really deep-seated belief that if people really wanted it to change, it would have changed a long time ago. And by people, I meant the rest of the automotive aftermarket, the rest of the industry, not just the repair community. Although there's a lot to be said for self-help and self-direction, and those elements that are so important in moving from where you are to where you want to be. But the interview really got me to thinking about a lot of things, and especially in conjunction with where I am in my disease and treatment and recovery. It got me a lot. It got me to thinking a lot about restoration, restoring yourself to at least a position of familiarity, a position where you're comfortable with, that you're close to where you were before, which ain't so easy to do when you're getting old. So, because you never know whether whatever it is that's ailing you at that particular moment is a function of your treatment and recovery, or whether it's a function of old age. Or whether it's, rejuvenation or resurrection. In many cases, it is about reinventing yourself, about being in a position where you find you have no choice but to recreate the story of you. And it's pretty interesting, really. We moved from New York when I was at the end of my 15th year, just before my 16th birthday, which would be a big deal in and of itself. But we had moved from Brooklyn out to Long Island when I was 9, just 6 years, almost 7 years earlier. When we moved from Brooklyn to Long Island, not only did I have to make a whole new set of friends, I also had to go ahead and acclimate myself to a completely different environment, suburban versus, living in an apartment building in Brooklyn. And that was difficult in and of itself. Then moving to California, when I was almost 16 was even more difficult because I had to move away from all my friends yet again, and and literally reinvent myself, because living in LA at that time in 1962 and living on Long Island in 1962 were, I mean, you might as well have been on two different planets. It was very, very different. Uh, and the choices that you got to make were very, very different as well. I mean, at that time in LA, pretty much all you have to do is watch Grease to kind of figure out where things were. You were either a surfer, a soch, or a greaser. Um, you can look all of those up for cultural reference. Uh, and if you didn't fit comfortably in any one of those groups, you were pretty much an outlaw. You didn't fit anywhere. Well, I've kind of done that with my career, in a number of respects. Yeah, I had planned to go to college. I had planned to become um, a marketing advertising professional here in California. But while we lived in New York, I was going to become an attorney. There was no doubt in my mind that I was going to become an attorney, because my father's first cousin, Howard, who, outside of my Uncle Dick, my father's youngest brother, um, may have been the coolest guy I'd ever met. And I say that because he had a 1956 or 57 Ford Thunderbird and a job. And he'd gone to Cornell Law, editor of the Quarterly, um, on and on and on and on. And when we came to California, I decided that law was not going to work for me, and that I was going to go ahead and do something else in advertising and marketing. Um, Fascinated me as much because that's the school that I went to, and it was one of their specialties at the time, and because it was convenient. And I was going to become a mechanic technician so I could pay for college, and then move on from there. Um, it didn't work out that way because I fell in love with what I was doing, and that was fixing cars. And I fell in love with working with my dad, and with my mom and our family, and in a family business. And I felt like I was contributing, and it was in a positive and powerful way. And the psychological, psychic payback was really profound. Made me feel good all the time. Um, but I also realized that I was never going to make any money, and that didn't feel good, and that didn't do a lot for me, except for make me angry and frustrated. And as a result, when I had the opportunity to deliver this speech, and I'll go ahead and I'll leave the URL in the written blurb that's attached to this. So if you're interested in it, you can listen to it. Those of you who know me and don't know that part of my story, don't know that part of my history, might be interested in it, because it's a big part of who I am and who I've become, as a human being and as a person on this planet, and really, to a large degree, what motivates me. Um, but when I gave that speech, I had opportunities that were presented to me that I never thought I'd ever have. I became an industry leader. I became a trade journalist. I became a speech writer. I became, I wrote 8 books on automotive shop management eventually. In other words, I was in the process of reinventing myself yet again, of once again becoming um, a different iteration of whoever it was I had become before, or who I was before. And the reason I mention all of that now is because when I became ill, when I was diagnosed, and it became apparent that my life, as I was aware of it at that point, was going to take a different turn. I recognized I was going to have to reinvent myself, resurrect myself, become reborn yet again, not necessarily in a religious sense, but certainly in the sense of who I am, what I'm all about, what I'm likely to do, um, etc. And I've done that, or I'm in the process of doing that. And if you've been following the blog and you followed the last few blog posts, you know that I'm very deeply, immersed in trying to get that done right now. And I think the book is a part of that. I think writing this far was a large part of that. And if it wasn't a large part of that process, then it certainly is a large element of the future. But I believe it was a large part of that, and I believe it will be a large part of the future. And there'll be more about that later on in future blog posts as we're going to go live tomorrow. Remember the rule. The rule is the halfway to the door rule. One of Schneider's laws that you'll never reach your destination because you're always going to make it halfway there. But halfway there is better than not getting there at all. So we're damn close. The website goes live tomorrow. The order for the books will go in. The author's copies of the books will go in tonight. Promotional work and publicity will start soon thereafter. So watch this space, as they say on television, and you'll find out what's happening next. In the meantime, stay well, take care, and recognize that whatever I'm doing and however I become, you become a really important part of my world. So till tomorrow, and this is Mitch signing off. Stay well, take care.